Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are going to implement React Router, which is version 6 right now at the time of this recording, into our application. If you're here from the previous 2 years of the last iteration of this application, you'll know that we were running React Router version 5. And this is the first major version update with a significant amount of changes in terms of just the implementation syntax. As far as how the actual library works and what it does for us, that is the exact same. It follows largely the exact same concepts we covered in the last video when we walked through how a web application, depending on the route and the subroutes you navigate to, will either decide to keep or remove and change different components on the page. And what those different components will be is largely up to our choice. The library just helps us execute on those decisions that we make. So let's talk about how we actually implement React Router version 6 into the application. So here, let's just walk through the docs really quickly so that we get a good familiar understanding of majority of how most React libraries work for us. So you can either choose to read the docs or start the tutorial. The great thing about starting the tutorial is you get to go through a very simple setup of how they'll want you to walk through the major features of React Router version 6. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to show you how it actually is implemented because I understand how this routing library works. But if you're ever curious, go through this tutorial and just follow the instructions for this tutorial. It's really great. You get to build a sample application and just see step by step how this routing is built from the bottom up. We're going to go through as well in our application, but this one is straight from the library creators themselves. But the great thing about the tutorial is they have to show you how to install the application. And it's honestly really simple. All we have to do is just initialize the actual library into our packages. So here, they're really just using Create React App the way that we have to create some kind of tutorial application that you can walk through in case you don't have one. We can skip all this because we already have all this stuff. But what we really need is we need this part where we install the browser router. But first, we have to install the application. So to install the application, you just want to look here. Install React Router dependencies. npm install React Router DOM at 6. You can use npm. I'm going to use yarn. So let's go back to our terminal. And let's install into our application React Router. So we're going to say yarn add React Router DOM at 6. So that's saying, hey, give me React Router DOM version 6. Now, the reason why it doesn't give you the latest one, sometimes depending on React Router DOM themselves and the package maintainers, they may be having some kind of conflict between a lot of these different versions that they're supporting. Version 5 may still be the most popular. They may be rolling out version 6. Therefore, they want you to specify when you want 6. Even though it may be the major version they support. Again, a lot of times these libraries are heavily dependent upon by the majority of different applications in production that rely on them. So there's a lot of heavy decision making they have to make when rolling out major versions, especially ones that have sweeping breaking changes, like version 6 in this particular case. Here, version 6 also is not backwards compatible yet at the time of this recording. Meaning that if you have version 5 and you upgrade your application's library to version 6, your application will not work because version 6 does not support the features that existed in version 5. So this is a very important thing to understand about a lot of these libraries. They may want to make updates and they may do so, but oftentimes there will be conflict in how they do it. Because of the fact that with the upgrades, maybe they have better patterns or better ideas of how they want this library to work. Now, sometimes in order to do that, they may not be able to support the previous working functionality. When that happens, they have to come up with a strategy. And different libraries and different companies that support these libraries may have different strategies, which is an unfortunate side effect. In this particular case with React Router DOM version 6, some students who have taken this course when we were doing version 5 may have experienced a lot of frustration trying to use version 6 because it's not backwards compatible with version 5. This is an unfortunate side effect of the library's decision when they rolled out version 6. So this is an important thing to think about when it comes to when to upgrade a library. So with React Router DOM, I want to highlight one thing is that oftentimes in them, they'll have an upgrade guide. So if you watch the upgrade guide and go through it, you will understand some of the key features in the upgrade from one major version to another. Usually they'll lay out steps about what components or what features have now been removed and are now being upgraded. And similarly, they'll also tell you when you can actually directly update the version. So here, if you read through this guide, it really lists out the major steps required. First, you got to upgrade your React version to at least 16.8 or greater. So another thing to note about a lot of these libraries is that some of these libraries, depending on the version of the library you downloaded. So in this case, React Router version 6 requires you to have React version 16.8 or greater. Version 6 of React Router DOM will not work with anything lower than React version 16.8. So that is one of those considerations you may have to make when upgrading libraries. Another one is when upgrading React Router version 5.1 and above, you have to remove certain components. I know these might not make sense to you if you haven't touched version 5, but the main thing that this really shows you is that they may want you to remove old features, and they may also want you to refactor certain code patterns from those old libraries. That's all these two really represent at a high level. So that's one important thing. You may have to do this first before you actually follow through with the final step, which is where you upgrade the version of the library itself. So these are some important things. If you don't do these properly, you may see a ton of breakages across your application, which may be significantly more difficult to resolve once you've actually upgraded. So this is one of those important things that it's a really good moment to understand about a very particular case that does happen a lot when working with React, which is that some of the supporting libraries that you use may go through major version changes. When that happens and there are breaking changes, there is a process of going through the upgrade with them. It's oftentimes kind of painful, but it's definitely one of those things that is a great moment to really understand how these libraries work with your application, but also the general development cycle and life of an application that you're building in production as a professional developer. So I just wanted to highlight this thing because it's really on top of mind, and we actually went through it together inside of this course. Now, for some of you who have not gone through it earlier when we did version 5, this may not be as relevant to you in terms of the actual experience of building out the application and the capstone project, but this is still a very good learning moment to understand that these things can happen. And I just want to guide you through some of the steps that you can take in order to go through these kinds of upgrades. So it's really not that scary. It seems way scarier than it is, but it's just one of those things that you just want to follow the instructions and go through your application, take it slow, one by one, and then finally make the upgrade. So now that we have installed React Router version 6, and I've gone on this little tangent right now about explaining some of these library changes, let's actually implement React Router version 6 into our application.